Some years ago, a man was talking to me about a particular scene in a movie that had struck him quite deeply. The basic scenario was there was a dialogue between a father and a son. The father had been a pretty terrible father, absent, alcoholic, always away from the family. And the son was desperate for a father. No matter how bad the father was, the son just kept coming back to him again and again. And in this particular scene, the father is almost angry because he's so ashamed. He's like, just leave me alone. Give up on me. And the son was like, no, I need a dad. To the point where the father simply turned to the son and said, tell me what you want from me. I'll give it to you. Then you can go away. And the son simply turned to the father and said, I want you to fight for me. And this guy had been so deeply moved by that, I think, because it's spoken to his experience. And I think there is something there which speaks into all of our experience. We can feel so alone. We feel like in this world we're just fighting to get by day after day. And deep down there is that yearning that someone would fight for you. Someone would understand what you're going through, and they would be on your side in the battle with you. Now, as a child, that's probably something you cry out to your parents for. In your marriage, that's probably something you're crying out for your spouse to do. How often when you're having a fight with your husband or wife, deep down what you're actually saying is, I need you to fight for me. I need you to understand my pain enough that you're going to be sacrificing yourself for me. But I think on a deeper level, how often do we actually say that to God? We can feel so abandoned by God. I'm sure you've all had that experience where at the time of your deepest need, you cry out to heaven and heaven is silent. And it's so natural to then just act like an orphan. To say, well, if I've been abandoned, it's just me. No one's coming to save me. I've just got to do it myself. And I think that's the place where most people in our world are. Pope Benedict, in one of his writings, he addresses that. And he has this beautiful line where he basically says that for every generation from the dawn of time, people have been looking up to heaven, crying out for God to do something. And all they've heard back is silence. But at the appropriate time, at one moment in history, God gave his definitive answer. And that answer was Jesus. And what he was trying to say there is that God is fighting for us. He breaks into the world at this key moment and he enters into that battle on our behalf. And he enters into the ultimate battle. The battle which makes our everyday sufferings and trials seem almost trivial. It is that big cosmic battle between life and death, setting us free from the slavery of sin, the stuff that really holds us down. Now, what we see here in the readings, we've got these first reading in Gospel, which is it's an amazing parallel that the church has given us here. The first reading is this ancient story from the book of Genesis, where Abraham is called to sacrifice his son. Now, it's a strange story. I'm sure you've read this many times trying to work out what is going on. It's made even stranger when you realize that Abraham is about 90 years old and his son is not a baby. His son is probably about 20 years old, strong enough to overpower his father at any moment. And yet, in this strange encounter, his son trusts the father so much. He basically is saying, Father, I believe that you are good. And so even if you're calling me to do something so horrendous, I trust that somehow this is going to be good. And so here, this strong 20-year-old son allows himself to be bound hand and foot, placed on top of a pile of wood, while his father is holding a knife. Doesn't look good. And yet it's as though there is Isaac basically saying, I'm prepared to be sacrificed, even though I don't understand why, because I trust that there is some purpose behind this. Now, as it is, God intervenes. He doesn't need to get sacrificed. But that story comes to its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. Because here, Jesus basically steps into the world and he turns to the Father and he says, Father, I'm prepared to pay the ultimate price so that these people can be set free. I trust you so much that I'm prepared to go to the cross and die if they can live. He fights for you. He steps into the gap. He's prepared to pay the ultimate price so that we can be set free. And what we hear here in the gospel is this moment where it's almost the point where Jesus turns his face directly towards Calvary. He climbs the Mount Tabor, which is just up near the north of Israel, near Galilee. It's a spectacular mountain in the middle of this open plain. He climbs to the top of this mountain, and there in this place of prayer, Moses and Elijah appear to him. And as it says in the Gospels, they were speaking to him about the sacrifice that he was going to make. There's almost this moment where Jesus chooses to fight this battle on behalf of the whole of humanity. And heaven itself now comes to strengthen him and console him as he goes. He's transfigured before them, radiant with light, almost like a promise of the resurrection. There's a line in the letter to the Hebrews where it says that for the sake of the joy that laid before him, Christ willingly went to the cross. And it's almost referring back to this moment where he is given a glimpse of the resurrection. And it's not only his resurrection, but it's our resurrection. He is given that sign of the hope for which he's now prepared to die for. And so from that moment, he returns down from the mountain of Tabor and he sets his vision completely now for Mount Calvary. He fights the battle for us. And this is our hope. This has to be our confidence. In the second reading, St. Paul, he's basically trying to put this into stark reality for us. This passage from Romans 8, it is one of the most powerful moments of the whole of Paul's letters. Now you've got to realize that Paul is not writing this by hand. He's dictating this to someone. If you can imagine St. Paul standing in the corner of the room, just getting so passionate as someone on the other side of the room is frantically trying to write this down. And if you listen to what Paul is saying, if God is on our side, who can be against us? If God did not spare his own son, but gave him up for the benefit of us all, then we must be certain that after such a gift, he will not refuse anything. If God was prepared to give his only son for you, he's not going to hold anything back. You can have absolute confidence because you know that God is fighting for you. He's not some distant, absent father. He understands your pain. He knows what you're going through, and he is fighting that battle for you. Now, Paul goes on, and he basically says, could anyone accuse those that God has chosen? When God acquits, could anyone condemn? Could Jesus Christ condemn you? No, because he not only died for us, but he rose from the dead, and there at God's right hand, he stands and pleads for us. Basically, what Paul's saying is, Jesus stands as your defense lawyer. He's not standing there in condemnation and judgment. He's fighting for you. He stands by your side, pleading before the whole of heaven, basically showing the Father, saying, look at my hands and my side. I died for them. They're innocent. I paid the price. That's the confidence we need to have in God. We have not been abandoned. We have not been forgotten in our pain. We have a God who is fighting for us. But we need to proclaim this. How many people think that there are orphans? How many people have given up on God and given up on the church because they think they're being condemned? They think that they're being asked to just grit their teeth and try hard and never be good enough. We need to proclaim this hope of a God who sacrifices everything so that we can be set free.